I wanted to take the time to make a video in honor of Kentaro Miura, who I found out recently passed away. To be honest, I wasn't going to do a video until one of my friends and collaborators for the channel, Gimli, suggested that I do one. I honestly really think that it speaks to the influence of Miura on myself and many other fans of his work, and on the medium of manga and the realm of dark fantasy in general. I mean, my friend Gimli isn't the biggest anime guy or anything, and the news even reached him. I think that really says something about the impact of the work. So, maybe that's a sign I should do a video. To be honest, I really had been planning on getting back to talking about Berserk again at some point in the not too distant future, as my Berserk videos, the few that I've done, are among my most watched videos. Lately I've been trying to re-explore some of these older anime series and improve upon my older videos without being too redundant. I feel like I've already covered the biggest topics on Berserk, but perhaps I'll go over them here briefly, in lieu of not being overly analytical in my typical Merlin the Mighty style. Instead, I'll do what I've been doing in my videos the last couple years. I'll get a little more personal. Berserk has some of the best artwork I've seen in a manga, and really in any other comic for that matter. I love Miura's attention to detail, his excellent use of shading to bring shadow to full force in line with the themes of the story. He also makes some really horrifying creatures and doesn't shy away from gore, of course. Truthfully, I haven't read too much of the manga due to its honestly very dark subject matter and just simple lack of access to it. But I have watched the 1997 anime, which is one of my favorites of all time, so I may go back and do a full retrospective on it at some point, but I'll say here that Berserk is one of the most beautiful anime that I've watched. That's not to say I think it's necessarily the best animated, though it is pretty good for the time, and it works well within the budgetary constraints and puts focus on areas it really needs to. Even when some of the battles turn into freeze frames as stills, I didn't mind that because it basically turned into art from the manga, which looked great. The character design had a realism to it that I wasn't used to compared to many other anime series that I'd seen up to that point, and it really did the medieval western fantasy so convincingly. The battles with Zod the Immortal and of course the Eclipse still give me chills just thinking about it. The music was also a factor, combining the operatic wailing sometimes with more electronic elements. What I think causes Berserk to endure and connect with so many of its viewers and readers over the years are the themes that it explores, through a dark world and with strong, vibrant characters. The core of the 97 anime, and I think to some extent the whole franchise, is the contrasting relationship between Guts and Griffith and one man's eventual betrayal of the other. The hardest thing for me as a viewer, and the reason I think there's still so much debate about it online to this day, is around Griffith's deeds. The thing is, I really liked Griffith. He was a man of unnoble birth who, through sheer force of will, sought to bring his dream to reality and rallied others to his cause to give them something to fight for in a land where they were stepped on by those who considered themselves more worthy or just more powerful. Guts, a man who seemingly had nothing to stand behind and really didn't believe in anything other than his own survival, was brought into the arms of Griffith and his band of the Hawk. He found connection with the people there, and with Casca, and perhaps in Griffith most of all, who he simply admired for that sheer force of will despite all odds. And yet, Griffith's drive ultimately led him to fulfill a destiny he believed he was meant for, though ultimately it did come down to a choice, which perhaps revealed who he truly was. As if in vengeance for Guts showing he didn't need Griffith anymore, that feeling of betrayal suggests that Griffith was not so different from those he wished to rise to meet and perhaps surpass. Looking back at the anime watching it, it was kind of all there. Griffith carried himself as a nobleman and believed that his achievements of his goals were worth any price. It proved that even those who were most loyal to him could be thrust aside if need be. And then of course there is Guts, the badass who continues on his journey of revenge against all odds. Truly, with the power Griffith has at his disposal at that point, Guts doesn't seem like he can win, but he fights on anyway. There's something about that tenacity that rivals Griffith and is even more pure in a way, as Guts is changed for the better, while the other man changes for the worse. But perhaps their true natures were simply revealed by those circumstances. I know that anime series based on manga are often just promotions to read the comic, but for the most part, I feel the 97 anime kind of works on its own as a self-contained thing. It means the ending is really dark and only slightly hopeful at best, but it had a profound impact on me. After watching it, I felt kind of crappy the rest of the day, which up until that point, I couldn't really say the same about any show that I'd watched, and really was unrivaled until Devilman. Ugh. I had become so attached to those characters and felt for Guts in that moment when all his friends were murdered and the woman he loved was taken advantage of by the person he admired most. I mean, that scene is just really heartbreaking. I see the 97 Berserk as a great tragedy that really carries the manga if you want that sweet catharsis of Guts getting his revenge. Hopefully. It's not the most uplifting series, but its emotional punches are strong ones. It's a classic that I highly recommend if you haven't seen it. His aesthetic is very unique and a tribute to the dark fantasy genre. Even many of my fantasy short stories and my first fantasy novel owe much to the man's work. I hadn't planned on doing this video, but I am really glad that I did. What's your favorite thing about Berserk, or maybe Miura's other work? Let me know in the comments if you'd like. Alright everyone, take care and remember to stay magical.